Hey guys, it's me Locke here today with a brand new video, and today I want to talk about a topic which is really important to me as a Battlefield 4 player and a Battlefield franchise player, and that is of course competitive gaming. Now in this video today, I'm going to give you my opinion on Battlefield as a competitive gaming front and what it can do in order to evolve into a successful competitive gaming franchise and offer lots of more perspectives for EA and DICE to consider across the years. So as we all know, Battlefield has always been one of those games that has so much potential behind it as a video game and as well as a competitive video game, but it's never really taken off. Battlefield 3 is a prime example of where a good game with lots of competitive aspects went horribly wrong and never got the opportunity it deserved. And Battlefield 4 is a good example of a game that is practically already primed for competitive gaming, but it really just hasn't received any investment or thought to the point where it could become a good competitive game. So what I'm going to do is make a sort of guideline specifically for Battlefield 4, but could also be seen as a base for future Battlefield franchise installments in order for it to become a successful esports and competitive game. Now these are a list of adaptations from the game itself and from other FPS games in order to encompass some kind of competitive gaming attitude and style inside Battlefield 4. To begin with, one thing I really want to see in Battlefield 4 comes from its main esports rival Call of Duty, and that is League Play. Now a lot of you will not know what League Play is, so here is a quick summary. Now League Play is a matchmaking system in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and Call of Duty Ghosts, and the system allows players to play against people around the world as an individual or in a team on their own skill level. Now the game mode adapts and removes certain aspects of the game in order to make it more competitive and removes things such as claymores and some weapons deemed unbalanced to create a level playing field. When you start playing League Play, you are put into a series of 5 placement matches with your team or by yourself, and you're placed into a variation of modes in order to compete in. Now after these matches, each player or each team is placed into one of 5 skill divisions of which they climb in order to reach the top division. Now once each month is over, teams are drafted into tournaments to play for a prize. Now this system would work fantastically in Battlefield. Players already have that competitive tactical attitude, so why not make them aspire to be in a top division? Not only would this increase playtime, it would increase publicity, it would increase events, and would make Battlefield players aspire a bit more to competitive gaming than they do now. They're not very wary of the competitive gaming front, which is a real issue. Now, one of the reasons I even played Black Ops 2 was because of League Play. It completely changed the dynamic from local games, it made games more interesting and more competitive, and it also made for some good, important and interesting matches, which made me want to play the game more because I was wanting to be in the top division. I think it would be a great mode to see in Battlefield 4 incorporated with Battlelog. So the next thing I want to talk about in Battlefield 4 is just the map design. Now map design inside Battlefield 4 has to be praised for just how diverse and how complex it is, and DICE have done really well on that front, but not necessarily on the competitive front, because although we have these great designs, inside these great designs, in order for smaller modes, competitive modes to exist, you need areas which will offer some feasibility for a competitive playstyle or competitive attitude to perform. Now as you can see inside Battlefield 4, each of the maps have to accompany every single game mode inside Battlefield 4. So Conquest, Rush, Team Deathmatch, Obliteration, 5v5 Defuse, they all have to be in the same map, but of course at different scales, which makes for a very difficult challenge. Now, of course, lots of these maps work fantastically for modes such as Conquest and Obliteration due to the scale and of course the battlefield being so big and accompanying this kind of game mode, but they don't work at a smaller scale on Team Deathmatch or 5v5 Defuse due to the simple fact that they weren't designed with that in mind. It's clear and obvious that these smaller scale zones were just simple, yeah, let's crop it down to this area and hope it works out. Let's think about Conquest and Team Deathmatch and Defuse will all be in the sort of smaller picture. It wasn't included in the bigger idea behind the map, and that creates a real problem for the competitive gaming front. So for me, in order for a map to be a competitive gaming map, it has to have something that I call choke points, and these are completely lacking from Battlefield 4 on the smaller scale. Now, choke points are basically a prime example of an area which you need to work for tactically in order to gain the advantage over your enemies. And you can see this quite a lot in Conquest Large. There are certain objectives that if you gain, you will clearly own the advantage of the map. You will definitely have the advantage of how the flow of gameplay occurs, and that works in your favour. But on a smaller scale, these don't happen in game. There is only one map that I can think of, and that is Flood Zone, where choke points exist. There is nowhere else on these smaller scale maps where tactical areas come into play. You just have the objectives and that's it. There's not an area in the map, bar possibly Flood Zone, where you can say, look, yep, we're going to get up to that point, we're going to control that point, and as a result, we will have the advantage. It's completely lacking because, yet again, the maps were designed for a larger flow of play in mind. They weren't thinking about the smaller modes. And unfortunately, that sort of plague has condemned most of the Battlefield maps not to work in a competitive environment. And within that competitive environment, you need maps that you can rely on to consistently produce good tactical fun play to watch, and it just doesn't happen. Now, I am quite hopeful for Battlefield 5 and of course the upcoming DLC Dragon's Teeth. If Battlefield 5 is indeed police based, there could be lots of urban combat, and we do know that Dragon's Teeth is based around urban combat, and I think that offers great choke points, and I think that offers a real starter for competitive play to start entering the game. And I think Dragon's Teeth will really be the DLC that could drive a more esports attitude into Battlefield 4, and I hope that is the case, because otherwise Battlefield 4 will never really come out of the non-competitive state that it's in. But one thing I really want to clear up with the new Dragon's Teeth DLC is that I don't want to see these lanes happen again, and lanes are something that I really do need to explain, because a lot of you already hate them, but you just don't know that you hate. So lanes are literally lanes. They are a map design where segments of road or a small tunnel is placed between two different teams in order to create a practical bloodbath. Now, Battlefield and DICE, they probably refer to these as what I would call choke points, but in the end, they do not work at all. A prime example is, of course, Operation Metro. It is just a bloodbath. There is no tactical play behind it, there's no advantage play behind it, and you need verticality in order for that esports environment to exist. You can't just have violent bloodbath lanes. They won't work in the similar sort of environment that we do see in public matches. And unfortunately, I do have a strong feeling that Dragon's Teeth could also throw in this lanes attitude and basically become a bloodbath that we've already seen in Operation Metro. I hope that isn't the case, but only time will tell, really. Another thing that needs to be achieved in Battlefield 4 in order to allow competitive gaming to thrive is the option for admins to ban or remove certain in-game items, and a good example of this is yet again in Call of Duty esports. Certain items which are deemed unbalanced or overpowered are automatically removed, and equally if two teams come to the agreement that they don't want certain items in game, they will mutually agree for the admins to get rid of them, and it makes for a more level playing field. Now, there are lots of examples in Battlefield where certain things will need to be removed. So we have, for example, claymores and certain rocket launchers and possibly even grenade launchers, because these are certain items which could create an uneven playing field. There are lots of other pieces of equipment that I haven't mentioned, but of course they would have to be mutually agreed by the admins as well as the players. But there is another concerning aspect of Battlefield 4 which really needs to be addressed, and that is the more inbuilt items of the game. There are lots of systems in game that actually completely alter the possibility of competitive gaming being involved. So there are two good examples that come to mind when we're talking about these in-game falters, and the first of them is suppression. Now, suppression is a system where you open fire on somebody in order to knock them off of their accuracy and stop their bullets from hitting the actual target. Now, although they could be aiming down their sight, if you're spraying at them or suppressing them, those bullets may not hit where they initially aimed for. And this is great in a public match. It's also used in real life. It's a good system to have. It creates an element of realism, but on a competitive front, it would not work at all. And the reason for this is because any element of randomness is completely removed from competitive gaming, and that's what suppressive fire does. Now, although you're aiming at your target, there is no guarantee that you will hit your target, and as a result, the power is taken away from the player, which means they have no control. and that element of randomness is just non-existent in competitive gaming. It doesn't exist for the pure fact that it creates lots of unfair moments, lots of ridiculous moments, and tactically could be very damaging. Another example of this in Battlefield 4 are the visual effects in the game. So for example, the sunlight can temporarily blind people, but somebody else may have their back to it, or things such as fog or rain could potentially ruin the game because it creates an uneven playing field. And one final example is of course the 3D spotting system, which allows you to spot players out even if they're behind a smoke grenade or if you've been flashbanged, and overall just creates some really difficult moments that probably wouldn't work very well in that competitive playfield. The next thing I want to talk about are the amount of things inside Battlefield which are already there but aren't used enough. So for example, on the game modes front, we have Diffuse, Domination, Squad Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, and even the possibility of adding a small version of Obliteration, which is basically like Demolition on Call of Duty. Those modes are very good competitive modes, but yet again are hindered by map design, and yet again are very underused and under-advertised. Another thing Battlefield already has is its test servers. Now the test servers trial new types of game modes, new types of server configurations in order to make the game better and make it flow better progressively. So recently we've had rubber banding issues. On the PS4 test servers, there has been no rubber banding whatsoever. So these ideas are little trial and error sort of tactics in order to progressively make the game overall a better game. Now why not use these test servers for competitive gaming? Change some map designs, remove some aspects of the game, get rid of the lighting effects and see how that works out. And I think this could be a possibility to allow professional players to give their own feedback on the game and modify the game. Now the great thing is about smaller companies who do competitive gaming, such as for example Counter-Strike, is that a lot of the influence of the fans does indeed get involved in how the game is configured. And Battlefield, although a large company, also does get its fans involved. We have lots of balancing issues which generally rely on the community's sort of standing on it. So for example, we've had lots of weapon buffs and also lots of vehicle buffs. Those were all down to the community, so why not allow professional players and community players to dictate some of the aspects of professional gaming? It makes sense. These test servers are already there and could quite easily be utilized in order to make competitive gaming servers. Next is Commando Mode, which at the moment is very controversial in public games, but I think it could work in a competitive Battlefield game, and the reason for that is just how much managers can utilize it. Now people don't realize, but a lot of esports teams in competitive Call of Duty actually have managers who watch the game live and then give them some tactics and some feedback on how they can alter their game for the next round through their headsets. Now if I were a manager, it would be fantastic to have a tablet, get a heads up view. Obviously not allow things such as UAVs or cruise missiles only on certain instances, that'd have to be debated and decided, but just to get a heads up view of what's going on, where the choke points are, where they're failing and where they're succeeding tactically in order to alter their gameplay. I think that would be really effective and would work really, really well. And although at the moment Commando Mode is plagued with lots of controversy, I think it would work in such a great way on competitive fronts, and I think it's something that needs to be looked into. They've already got it. It's already a great system for those who use it at the moment. If you feel as though you do not use it, you should definitely give it a try because it does make a big difference in public matches. Next is Battlelog, and just how underutilized Battlelog is. Now of course they have the apps and they have the actual website itself, and if you go on MLG.com you will see live streams on the regular basis on the main screen, lots of analysis going on, and I can imagine that happening on Battlelog. Add some integration for competitive gaming, make a tab for it, promote YouTubers who are making great content. You can already apply your Battlefield content to a Battlefield form which makes them advertise it or give it a read over. So why not have that on their main page? You can promote YouTubers, you can promote live streams and competitive companies such as ESL, possibly even get integrated with MLG at some point. And I think that would make for an overall more watchable Battlefield, because at the moment on Twitch TV, it never comes in the top 5 because it's just being purely dominated by competitive gaming such as Dota, League of Legends, it just doesn't happen anymore, and I think that's a shame, because if that integration was on the main page, if Twitch TV was advertised and YouTube was advertised on the Battlelog page, there would be a substantial amount of viewers. And at the moment, competitive esports gaming has over 21 million viewers. So imagine just how many of them play Battlefield. Probably a fair chunk of them do. Possibly into maybe 1 or 2 million play Battlefield or recognize it, use the app. Why not integrate it? It's a great idea, and I think it really needs to happen. Finally, something I want to touch on is Levolution, which is a great in-game aspect, but it's underutilized in the smaller modes. Now, Levolution does of course mean things such as light switches, the destructibility, but actual Levolution moments which substantially change the map dynamic aren't in smaller modes, and I think that's really unfortunate, because I feel as though that level and that aspect of Levolution could really make a tactical difference in game. Now, if I was somebody watching a stream who had never played Battlefield before but wanted to see what it was like, and I saw a building come down around the players when they're flanking a building, I would be so amazed at that, and I would buy the game. That's the reason I got into Battlefield. I saw some of the amazing moments happening on Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 2, and I wanted to get involved, which is why I was involved in the franchise later on. But we don't see that in competitive gaming in these smaller modes, because Levolution is underused in these areas. Now, there are some maps that do use it. An example is Zavod 311. The tower comes down, crashes up everything below it, and crumbles, which makes for a different kind of map. But something a bit more substantial, like the flooding and flood zone, would be really important, and I think the flooding in flood zone is actually a fantastic example of how you can alter a map and change the game style, push people to the rooftops, and really change the flow of gameplay. Levolution could be a big thing in competitive gaming. It could mean a big thing for commentators in competitive gaming. For example, Golden Boy, he's a well-known Battlefield commentator. He's done it a few times. I think he'd be very happy to commentate on how Levolution can change a game. It's a great advertisement, and it works well overall for the players. Now, of course, there's lots of things in-game that need to be changed, but now it's time to talk about things outside of the game that need looking into, and these are things such as investment, looking at prospects, and what could just go on for Battlefield esports. So, to start off with, I want to talk about some investment. I feel as though Battlefield are actually a fantastic company, because they do work incredibly well on the YouTube front. So for example, Battlefield as a company, you have to thank them overall, especially myself. They allow you to live stream their gameplay. They allow you to monetize their gameplay on YouTube and advertise and do incredibly well for yourself. But what they also do is they go that further mile. They invite YouTube figures to events to play some gameplay, to record it, to give it to you guys, the Battlefield community. They allow you to live stream certain early aspects of gameplay, which is really rare for a AAA company to do. It just doesn't happen anymore, and I think that they can expand a lot more with that. They do have lots of figures involved, but what if we had only in Battlefield on a bigger scale? So these only in Battlefield moments occurring across the web from lots of different YouTubers, advertised extremely well by Battlefield. I think that would benefit lots of people. EA as a company themselves actually do very well across the board on YouTube. You have to thank, for example, the Battlefield community managers globally, as well as the newer one which has just come in called Dan Mitra. He's very interactive with the community. They work well on Reddit and the forums. And you have to thank some of the other EA representatives such as marketing, because they understand and appreciate YouTube now. Companies don't do that anymore. Companies don't understand that yet. It's a new thing to appreciate YouTubers who show your game, and I think Battlefield is really driving with these only in Battlefield moments, but I think they need further investment into that front to really get it out there a bit more. Next, I think EA really need to recognize the possibility of esports really taking an extensive role on what they do. The esports market is clearly open. The new CSGO hasn't taken off as well as people wanted it to do. There's only really Call of Duty now on the FPS front, and like I mentioned, esports alone has 21 million users, 21 million regular viewers watching it. Now you can see, for example, Call of Duty's latest esports, the Call of Duty Championships, which offered $1 million, was doing incredibly well. It was buzzing all over Twitter, all over Facebook. Everyone was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it on YouTube. It was massive. It was a huge event. If only Battlefield gave somebody $1 million and said, look, host a tournament, I can only imagine just how much hype would be built around that. Now, they did try this back in 2012 when they partnered up with Virgin Media, but it just never happened. And you never heard anything about it again. It just didn't happen. No one really knows why. Probably because they came to the conclusion that Battlefield 3 wasn't a game worth doing a $1 million tournament for, because it couldn't accompany esports gaming. But it was unfortunate. It was clearly possible. I mean, even now you only have to look at, for example, the 32 versus 32 EU versus USA tournament that they did for the release of Battlefield 4 on Xbox One. That was a great tournament. Lots of people watched it, lots of people were talking about it. You had big public figures involved, big YouTubers, big Xbox representatives involved, and it was an overall fantastic tournament. I watched it live on my Xbox 360 at the time, moved on to my PS4 now, but yet again, it made me want Battlefield 4. It made me want to get into Battlefield 4. I watched the days of live stream that followed after that, of just seeing how good a game Battlefield 4 was, which was hosted by Golden Boy again, who was commentating over all of the Battlefield gameplay, talking with some developers. It was good fun, it was a smart idea, it was a good event, and it was great publicity. Why not do that again? Very feasible, makes competitive gaming more appealing. My next suggestion would be to attend events more competitively, focus a bit more on the competitive aspect of Battlefield. Now, I was at Eurogamer 2013, it was great fun playing a 64-player match at the booth of Battlefield, but why not add some competitive incentive in there? Why not show on some big screens the gameplay that's going on and offer the winner like a t-shirt or something? That would be incredibly smart. Now, there's also events in the UK such as Insomnia, which is an ongoing LAN gaming event where players compete with each other, teams compete with each other. Why not show up to that event and do a Battlefield LAN event? Now, I did know that they did this a few years ago, but it just never happened again. It was too complicated. LAN Battlefield 4 at Insomnia would be insane. I'd love to go to that. I'd love to compete in that tournament, but the chance of them showing up now is minimal, because they don't think about these small things which could just mean so much for the game as a franchise. Call of Duty's there, FIFA's there. Why not show Battlefield there? It just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Now, my final idea for Battlefield 4 to improve as a game, which kind of counts as an in-play aspect as well, is to add an auto recorder to Battlelog. Now, I remember on Black Ops 2 and even on some of the newer Call of Duty titles and even the older ones, you played a game and the whole match automatically got recorded from your perspective, put into a file, and was recycled every few days or so after you carried on playing the game and decided you didn't need the footage. The amount of times I can tell you that I've played Battlefield and not hit the record button and done something that was incredible and would have been an only in Battlefield moment that I could have put on YouTube and everybody would have gotten, everybody would have buzzed about it, is ridiculous. There are so many times when it happens when you play the game as consistently as I do. And with next gen now, the Xbox One recorder, the PS4 recorder as well, fairly capable of uploading to YouTube now easily, fairly capable of exporting your video content and getting it out there. It's a big opportunity just sitting right in front of them for them to just add games to a library that's already pre-recorded from your perspective. You go back, get it out of the game recorder. That's what I used to do on Black Ops 2 when I used to record and live stream some of that. It was great fun, it was a good idea, and it stopped us from missing these only in Battlefield moments. They have Battlelog, they are capable of doing it. Now, all of this just relies on investment. Are they willing to invest this much in servers? Because at the moment we still have that 300 ms or so lag, which is causing hit registration and rubber banding problems. Are they willing to do that, invest it and make that recorder happen? Are they willing to invest in events? It's all down to them now, but they've got the game. They've got a great game, a fantastic game. It has its problems, but it overall is a great game. They can do so much with it, but it lacks the initial thought process of, yep, look, we have this great game, let's move forward with it. Now, maybe that's because they are focusing on making it an even better game. But to me, I think it's not going to be a better game unless more people get involved with Battlefield. At the moment, we're a small community. In honesty, we really are. Comparatively to the likes of Call of Duty, we're not a big community. We're a large, sizable community. We're not massive, though, and we can expand on that. And Battlefield has one of the best communities out there. I think I can safely say that we do have the best community out there. If you look at my channel, you can just see stuff that I've posted on Reddit, live streams that I've done, and people were just so friendly and so smart and intelligent in the Battlefield community. They work together so well. Just look at all the hunting we did for Phantom Prospect and Phantom Trainee. We're a good team and we're a good community. I can say that. I can say that we are better than a Call of Duty community now, which is mostly filled with children. And in the end, this community is what will strive to make Battlefield a better game, given the investment. And I hope that does happen. Anyway guys, if you've hit this point by now, I have to thank you. It's a 25, 26, God knows when I finished long video, and it's rare for people to sort of stay along for that amount of time. I hope you value my opinion. Yet again, it is my opinion. You don't necessarily have to agree with me. These are just my ideas and my thought processes. So please, in the description below, in the comments below, get talking. Let's get on Reddit. Let's be the Battlefield community that we normally are. Start talking about how we can make Battlefield a competitive game. I'd love to hear your ideas and views. As always, it's been me, Lachlan. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again with another Battlefield 4 video. Another Battlefield